Rotimi. Take your time and just listen to this powerful message Mr. Dele Farotimi is sending to Nigerians. Let me know your thoughts also in the comment section below. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell notification. Now take a look.
But suffice to say that today you have a country where there is no justice for all, where there cannot be anything for all, because we've not created or dared to evolve the idea of citizenship. That is the idea that can stand against the system that has been built. We have built, when I say we, because it has taken our acquiescence as victims to have erected this evil edifice that we have managed to build. The edifice we have managed to build is incompatible with the idea of citizenship. The idea of citizenship is incompatible with a space unruled by law. So here is what I am proposing. One, let us all understand that as much as we may care to want a better country, for as long as we continue to fight against this system that is found on inequality of citizens or members, we cannot have any ideal happening to us. It is only when we have the clarity that one must be equal to the other and all must be protected equally by the law. That is when you begin to build on the idea of citizenship. It is only the idea of citizenship that can prevail against the system that has been built on feudalism. Feudalism speaks to the acceptable non-equality of persons who live within a space. Nigeria is found on that. So one person must always be willing to accept to be unequal to those who operate the system. Without a willingness to accept inequality, you cannot have peace in a feudal state. What you have today is a caricaturized judiciary, which does not offer any hope to the common man. Until we come to the point where we all realize that it has to be a demand for the operation of the rule of law in the space that we have built, we will continue to wonder when. I have been around the world a little. I've been privileged to see a bit of it. And what I have found in my travels is that it is the idea of citizenship that underpins every society that has advanced. The Chinese do not have what you call democracy, but they are better served by their rulers than Nigerians who touted democracy have been served by theirs. It is the aggregation of the interest of the people and the pursuit of the interest of the majority without discountenancing the interest of the minority. That is what provides the basis for citizenship. When we have a state such as the one that we have evolved, where bandits, terrorists will sit in meetings with elected officials of state, traditional rulers, and bandits, armed bandits, would dictate peace terms to the state, and the same state would have the room to harass citizens who are asking for better government, confine citizens who have dared to demand that they be set free from the evil empire that we have managed to evolve. Make it make sense that there are persons such as Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, for instance, in prison not by due process of law, because when trial has been extended beyond how many years, and then it doesn't, even the optic looks stupid. You're meeting bandits, armed ones, unrepentant. You're begging for peace. They are dictating terms. But the person who you say has called for armed insurrection, against whose people you've deployed fighter jets, these fighter jets do not know their ways around the Kankara forest or Sambisa, but they can walk. It does not make sense. So when we begin to demand that these questions be asked of the state. These are not questions that are being asked as a partisan. These are questions being asked. You can't even claim to be a patriot because there is no country commanding your patriotism. It is sick in the extreme to continue to believe that you can counter this system by engagement with it as though it were a system amenable to change. I am of the opinion that all of us must come to the knowledge of the fact that we are not dealing with partisan politics. We are dealing with issue of citizenship. These must move beyond the argument of I'm obedient, I am batified, I'm APC, I am revolutionary now. It doesn't matter. I don't care about your labels. What I care about is the substance of the issue. And the substance of the issue for me is that regardless of what you are and how you identify yourself, we are not citizens. Be enamored with the idea of citizenship to the point of desiring it. And the first basis of that is the right for you to vote. In the coming days, I have said this, and I think it is time that we also come to this understanding. We can talk from now to kingdom come. Nothing is going to change until we act. But we must also be deliberate about the actions that we take. I am of the opinion that the time has come to focus on building a broad-based pan-Nigerian movement that is found on a demand for citizenship and a respect for the rights of the Nigerian. This is not about what party you vote. You can go ahead and vote any party you care. But the idea of citizenship must be raised in direct confrontation against the idea of feudalism that governs Nigeria, and that is what has led us into this moment. If we are seen as citizens, no judge would dare to do the kind of things that have been done by our judiciary. 6 months, the judiciary had no pronouncement on emergency rule in Rivers State. If you have never seen a castrated judiciary before, you need not look any further than the Nigerian judiciary. And if the last hope of the common man be as comical, asinine, and useless as the Nigerian judiciary has become, then there is serious cause to understand that it is the system that has to be confronted. Why do I say this? All of us are creatures in time. Creatures in time. Last week I sang that song, Sheitoshi Oremi Ojonlo, do what you will, time is going. This week I sang, Beni Bata Yewa Sopola. When today is gone, they will say tomorrow. Tomorrow will not come one day. 20 years ago, a most brilliant Nigerian, one of the pillars of today's democracy, Chima Ubani, was violently snatched away from us. He's dead. Everything he did is today the source of legends. It is not by accident that the Nigerian state has never celebrated his like. If they will celebrate his like, you realize the lies they have told you about the likes of Tinubu fighting for democracy. But the relevance of the example I've just given is to let you understand very clearly that ideas outlive men. It is the ideas for which we live that endures. If we don't focus on the idea of citizenship to the point where it becomes something that the average Nigerian pursues with passion, understanding that it should move beyond partisanship, we will be mired in the mud that we found ourselves today, constantly bickering about ethnicity and constantly talking about religion. This morning, the totality of my preoccupation is to say to you, when will you come to the knowledge of the fact that it is the idea of citizenship that can take over and expel the evil that has overtaken us. In the absence of an idea to confront the evil, nothing would endure. Men will live and men will die. It is the ideas for which we live, the ideals by which we live our lives that would endure. So when I ask when, I was asking when would it be our time to rise as a people? When would there be water for all? And I'm not talking about floods in your home. When will there be qualitative education for all? When will there be power for all? When will there be justice for all? When will there be good roads for all? When would Nigeria rise above its many contrived limitations? The only time that happens is when we embrace the idea of citizenship. The idea of citizenship is what makes you work for the common good. Olówó kan láàrin olòṣì mẹ́fà. When you translate that properly, what it speaks to is the poverty of private wealth. In pursuit of our personal comfort and wealth, every one of us have become impoverished. The idea of citizenship, the very idea of it, when we embrace that, it becomes the antidote for the madness that we have embraced. There is a young man who is doing wonderful work across the length and breadth of Nigeria. And I speak to Peter Aka, Randy Peter. He speaks constantly to the idea of electoral reform. I mean, that gave me 110%, even though I despair. Well, whilst we may despair and whilst we may disagree, it is never going to happen that anything will change simply because we no agree. It is not enough to declare yourself to be disagreeable. You must come up with ideas that advances you beyond your disagreement. My belief is that the idea of citizenship pursued corporately is what will save all of us. If you're asking when will not happen until when you've embraced the idea that only citizenship found on the rule of law can deliver a democracy where your vote would count and where you can then proceed. I toyed with the idea of resting my lectures today. I toyed with the idea because I've come to the knowledge of the fact that sometimes it comes across as an unsolicited, thankless job. But I remind myself, some years back, I wrote a piece. I said, I do not write for you. It was at the peak of my frustration with the seemingly intractable nature of our crisis, as if it would never stop, nothing would ever change. And then I found a new lease of life when I decided that I'll make my preachments more or less testimonies against the obdurate generation that I have had to endure. So when I began to toy with the idea of not speaking, at least taking some time off, it struck me. I would be succumbing to despair, and I would have allowed my enemies to triumph, which is not something that appeals to me. I like the idea of irritating those who are unhappy with me. It gives me pleasure to irritate them. So, yeah, I am not going to rest my sermons. Those of you who are unhappy with it, bully for you. I enjoy the sound of my own voice, and I'm sure that to an extent, I still have something to say to those who will hear. And even if you are not hearing, I know a generation is coming who will pour over these videos in the search for a way out of the madness. I'm done with this week. Yorùbá will say, àbọ̀rọ̀ là ń sọ fọ́mọlúàbí. Tó bá dénú ẹ̀, àdòdìdì. Half a word is enough for the wise. I thank God for the privilege of life and the capacity to speak. I will not be silenced until I am silent. The more I pondered it, the more I realized that by Thursday, the only thing that kept reverberating in my head was when. We've said all these things ad nauseum. I have this habit of asking my PA to repost my old posts. And from time to time, there is usually a reluctance because there is a boring monotony to repeating the same post over and over. So I had occasion to explain to her, and I'm taking the time to explain this to you as well, so that you might begin to understand the basis for my exertions this morning. By Thursday or Friday, by Friday, I gave her my topic and I said, when? And in saying when, I was speaking from the depth of my despair about multiple things. One, the passage of time. Because we have this tendency to believe that time would solve Nigeria's problem. But what I have found is that time has not solved Nigeria's problem. Time has compounded Nigeria's problem. What has happened is that over time, evil appears to have triumphed. And because evil appeared to have triumphed, it is easy to despair when you have been hopeful about a better outcome for the country. So when I was asking when, it was when would we ever become? When would this hope of a better country ever materialize? When would we dare to be better than we've pretended to be? So all these were running through my head, and I gave that position, that question, when? That was my topic. And then this morning, as I began, because after having picked the topic, I had been hard pressed to now begin to think through and put some flesh to the question, when? So this morning, I did what I would usually do. Early morning, I didn't go to bed until about 1:30 or thereabout. So I went through my Facebook memory for the day, exactly, since it was a new day. And then a year ago, I found that the lecture I delivered a year ago to the date was a Sunday. It was titled The Urgency of Now. I ask you to go take a look, because I remember that what prompted that sermon was my belief that we had already wasted too much time. So I spoke to the urgency of now. I also imagined that the death of my leader, Baba Ogunlano, Shina Ogunlano, Sherubaon, made the urgency of time even more important in my consciousness at the time I was giving the lecture. And I said, the urgency of now. So I spoke to the urgency of now at that time. And then I looked further down my memory and I found an interview I granted to News Central, Mr. Akintemi. Exactly a year ago, I posted it. And one of the things I said very clearly is that every lone voice is a failed voice, and there must be a chorus before we may all be saved. And then I looked further and I found that 2 years ago, I posted this. I said, myopic idiots have been ruining Nigeria from the beginning of its sorry existence. But Buhari has managed to do what nobody else has ever done before. He has normalized criminal impunity and installed a career criminal in the presidency. I don't know why they are chasing Yele around today, but that was 2 years ago. And then in the same 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I said there is a great nation trapped inside the abomination that is called Nigeria. It is large enough for all the ethnicities and religiosities currently destroying Nigeria, and it is blessed enough to accommodate all in peace. 4 years ago. 5 years ago, I posted and I said, what do we do? Find common causes. Forget the secessionist talks. Correctly discern that we are misled by rulers who have taken away our citizenship as a collective and thereby enslaved us. Fight together for the common interest and stop allowing our evil rulers to point out our enemies. Same 5 years ago, I said identify the causes for which you will be prepared to war and further to which you'll be happy to die. If it comes to that, do not die in their war. It's not a call to cowardice. It is a call for clarity and a demand that the victims seek their own liberation. 7 years ago, I said Nigerians, a people trapped together in a sinking ship, quibbling over inanities and oblivious to the commonalities of our tragedies. 7 years ago, I said it is easy to yank the chains off the man that is conscious and aware of his enslavement, but it is nigh on impossible to free the man who views his chain as jewelries and adornment. 7 years ago. 7 years ago, I wrote Awolowo, Temperance and Private Jets. I've had that shared again this morning. 7 years ago, I said Oselu Titan or Jeluloko bereft of leaders afflicted by rogues. Now, why have I taken the time to reel all these out? It is to let you understand that my preoccupation is not partisan. I don't care what party you belong to. I couldn't care less what candidate you support or do not support. I am not about partisanship. I am about solving the mess that we have all created for ourselves. If we're going to do that without violence, we would have to find political solutions. So that would sometimes necessitate supporting one person or the other in a political contest. Now that that has been clarified, let me take us back to the question. When? Exactly when? You know, Wasiu Ayinde, the same one that is busy chasing planes, he once sang a song and he speaks to the issue. He says, Beni bataye wa tokbola, tola batun ton wa tun sokbola, ola tenri yen ki ton ara mi o wa ba se sile lomo ma de ba o. Let me break it down for you. When today is done, they'll say, oh, we'll do it tomorrow. When tomorrow is done, they'll say, oh, we'll sort it out tomorrow. That tomorrow never ever seems to come. And that is the situation in which we have found ourselves. Water for all by the year 2000. Electricity for all by the year 2000. Road for all, everything was for all by the year 2000. That was the slogan as I was growing up. This is 2025. There's no electricity for all. There's no water for all. There's scarcity of everything. We are worse off today than where we were before 2020. There is nothing to suggest that anything will change. And then I came across something. Some years back, maybe about 2-3 years ago, I came across the word of Buckminster. Buckminster was an American, and he wrote these words, and I think it speaks to our situation. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, you have to build a new model that makes the existing reality obsolete. The problem with us is that we're fighting an entrenched system that is found on an evil idea. We're fighting the idea of feudalism. The idea of feudalism is what has built the Nigerian state. Nigeria owes its parentage to Britain. Britain's sole interest in Nigeria is exploitation. And that exploitation was carried to its logical conclusion with the creation of the Nigerian state and its so-called independence in 1960. Upon its independence, the state that was founded was already on the trajectory to becoming feudalized because it never had basis for citizenship I have spoken extensively to this and I've written on the subject.
Let's take a look at how Nigerians are reacting. Let's